Mr. Norton, a very good day. Welcome to the broadcast.
Good day.
Thank you so much for making time for us amidst your very, very busy schedule. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We learned quite recently that you were in Region 5 at an area called Champagne, as more Indo-Guyanese supporters are reaching out to the PNCR and coming on board. And no sooner had you left there, a lot of intimidation and almost victimization of those residents living there. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we visited Champagne, Maikoni, where it is considered to be a traditional PPP stronghold. We have been engaging in these communities, talking to people about why they should vote for the PNU, PNC coalition, call it what you want. And we have been having very good responses. In fact, in Champagne, many persons identify some of the problems that they have there. Now, in the normal course of PPP operation, immediately after we left, they went into Champagne and they began to harass the people that would have met us. They also had the police go in and raising some old cybercrime issue. Now, this is a serious issue because Article 147 of the Ghana Constitution gives each and every Guyanese the right to assembly, the right to associate and choose whichever political party they wanted. And so, in a normal democracy, that would have been normal. But in the PPP state, they decide that they must intimidate, they must instill fear, and that no Indo-Guyanese must support any other political party other than them. It is not new. When we visited Bushlot, they did the same thing. Every community that you go into, what they tend to do is to harass the persons. This morning, they have asked the people who are supportive of us to go to the Maikoni police station, and then they brought them down to Georgetown talking about cybercrime. Now, the people have committed no crime whatsoever. The only crime they would have committed is in the minds of the PPP, that they dared to support a political party that it is not the PPP. Now, we are saying that we will support those persons because they support us and it is their right to do so. They have the freedom to associate. They have the right to exercise their own conscience. The Constitution gives that right. And the Constitution gives the right of freedom of expression. And therefore, as far as we are concerned, they are within the confines of the law. And the PPP doesn't have the right to harass and threaten them because they are not favorably disposed to the PPP. And so we will defend them. We will do everything to protect them. The People's Progressive Party historically intimidated and went as far as physically assaulting people who they know are supporting the opposition. And that's why we keep saying that it is not only ethnic discrimination, it's also political discrimination. Because the minute another ethnic group supports the PNCRA, PNU, then right away that is an avenue for the PPTPT to send in their thugs. And they now have money at their disposal to pay the thugs to do the things. But we will defend those persons that are supportive of us.
Yep. Yeah, so it's a lot happening on that front. What do you make of, let's talk about some economic issues, and I think we ultimately end up with what's happening in the Ghana Police Force. What do you make of all of this back and forth on the cash grant? You seem to have a clearly defined policy of how this thing should be rolled out and where you want it to go. Talk about the missteps of the government and what is your own thinking?
We, from the inception, said, at least since I am leader of the party, that we are supportive of the Guyanese people getting a substantial transfer of resources to them. And we still believe that, and we have advocated for that. We have also said, though they have pushed the society into poverty and people want the 100,000. It is inadequate. Now, when the issue emerged, don't forget Irfan Ali is on record as saying Norton want to give cash grants. They don't believe in cash grants. Jack Doe is on record as saying that. Anil Nandlal record. And so it is the political pressure that we have been put in that would have brought them here. And so when the president announced he was giving 200,000, I immediately pointed out and I asked them first for a definition of household. They couldn't. And so I became deeply concerned that just what happened with the COVID grant will happen, where they selectively decide that in coalition strongholds, a household means the person who owned the property, but a different definition for household in the PPP strongholds. And so we challenged them from day one on that. And because they lacked the ability to define a household and the dangers it portend, we recommended that we use Guyanese 18 years and above. And we do feel that if you use Guyanese 18 years and above, more resources will end up going to the people of Guyana. But we criticize what they're doing because it is ad hoc and unpredictable. What we are saying, first of all, we have argued that they owe the Guyanese people, because when they got the windfall from the increased prices as a result of the Ukraine war, we said then and did the calculation that Guyanese were entitled to $300,000. And we still think they should get it. But that apart, let's come now to transfer. We believe in transfers. We believe that transfer is one element of putting resources in the hands of the people. And we have argued that somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 per month can be transferred to Guyanese 18 years and above. And we see it as being done in a structured way so that the Guyanese community can know that every month they are entitled to 100,000 or 150,000. In government, we'll calculate it and ensure that people can get that amount. Why do we think it needs to be structured and predictable? We think it needs to be structured and predictable so it can be used for investment by people. They can, in building their house, use it as money indicative of their income so that they can get loans, they can get investment money. And we do believe if you take that structured approach, then what will happen is people guarantee a certain amount of transfer through the year. And it allows them to plan their lives and be able to use it as collateral to advance the quality of their life. And that is where we think we differ with the PPP. The PPP see cash grants as a means of political control and domination. They give you a little bit here, a little bit there, and if you don't behave yourself, they don't give you. We have a totally different approach. We believe the people of Guyana are entitled. We believe now that there are resources, but we see it with other measures. We see it as coming with measures to deal with the whole question of inflation and the high cost of living. We don't see it in isolation. And that is why we have argued with the high prices on food stuff. What it needs to be complemented with is a national agricultural program in which you seek to make each and every region self-sustainable as it relates to food. What that will mean is that there are more food stuff or products in the economy to absorb the excess resources that you will put into the economy. We have to increase the productivity, and we have to ensure that a lot of these resources, people put them in developing productive capacity. Once you are improving your production capability and your productivity, then the economy will be in a position to absorb the resources that you put in. And that is why I keep saying that Jagdeo is an economist and not an economist. Any basic idea of economics would know that you can take measures to counter inflation. And we recommended more than once measures to cope with the high cost of living and inflation. And in government, we will be taking a structured approach that allows us to give the people of Ghana more resources. But as we give them more resources, we are taking the measures to counter inflation and high cost of living so that it becomes real money rather than nominal money. And that is where the problem lies.
Do you think that the economist, Jagdeo, as you characterize him, they can reconcile saying that a raise for teachers will take up the inflation rate, and then now you're pouring $60+ billion in the economy? How do you reconcile?
Well, Jagdeo has always been a dishonest person, superlatively dishonest. If there was a word like dishonest, it would have been used, but I gather there's no such word. He's superlatively dishonest. And this is a man who, when he lost government in 2015, said clean voters list, biometrics a must. He changed his mouth. Not the first time he did it. He said no to cash grant. Now he's coming over like they mastered cash grants.
Renegotiation. All contract.
So you're dealing with a man who cannot be trusted when it comes to honesty and sincerity. Now, in dealing with the teachers, while the teacher strike was on, they were saying there wasn't any money. I recall us going out there and showing them the areas that they can take money from. But his dishonesty is not restricted to that. He said that we had to focus on infrastructure development and went on that if you could not find a balance, I heard him in a press conference repeating just what we said, that you have to reallocate the resources and find a balance between infrastructure development and human development. We're glad that he has come around to this position, but it shows his dishonesty. It shows his inability to be decent. And it also shows that he has no concern for the people of Guyana. He does what he thinks is politically expedient. And so what he's doing and saying now about these resources is because he recognized the PPP has become unpopular. And that the reality is Guyanese are not benefiting from the oil resources and they are reacting to it. So he's now forced to cut back some of the money he has organized for their family, friends, and favorites through contracts like the 7 billion T-body. And now trying to appease the Guyanese people by finding some form of balance. But he cannot. The PPP is transactionalist. And the summit of transactionalism is Jagdeo. And there's the point at which the transactions cannot be reduced, or else their benefit will be reduced. And so they find themselves in another contradiction. Where on the one hand they are accustomed to the corruption, where on the one hand they are accustomed to depriving the people of Ghana resources, and then on the other hand speak as if they like the people of Ghana. And it became so obvious that they do not have the interest of the people of Ghana at heart. And so that would have forced them to come in this direction. So they are there now reluctantly. Mm-hmm. They are not there with their heart and soul in it. They are there because the pressure has built up, and they are forced to be there.
Yeah, you've been talking about deep divisions in the PPP as a party, and supporters are leaving them. That might be symptomatic of what you experience at Champagne, where they can't afford for anybody really and truly to leave because of numbers, and then migration and all of that might be why they're holding on to the 2022 census. What do you sense is happening really and truly in that regard? And maybe this cash grant business, reluctantly, as you said, is a response to that.
The PPP is in crisis. They have had so much corruption at the senior government level that the average person in the society knows about it. The police, for instance, know that they have to protect corrupt people. The police, for instance, know that a particular minister had a family providing goods and services to the police. And so they ask themselves, if they can do it, why not us? And so what one can see is the greed and the corruption now turning into a fight internally. On the one hand, you have Barra Jagdeo with his historical corrupt crew, and then the emergence of Irfan Ali with a new corrupt crew. And there have been these clashes. And you see skirmishes in which Jagdeo is going after some of Irfan people, and Irfan is going after some of Jagdeo people. And it then forced Jagdeo to say, look, we can deal with corruption, and anybody who is corrupt cannot expect the protection of the PPP. Of course, here he's referring to Brutus. But let me say this. If you're going to deal with corruption, the place to start is Barra Jagdeo. He has got the most public accusation, global accusation of being involved in corruption. Why don't you start with an investigation into the claims of bribery and corruption against Barra Jagdeo? Additionally, the bribery and forgery in the local government election, no other person than Barra Jagdeo apologized for it. So he is well attuned to the realities. Now, at the community level, what has happened is that the PPP activists themselves are corrupt. Starting from COVID, where they were making a lot of money on the Guyanese people by not giving them, and then by giving and demanding a cut. So, what happened in PPP strongholds? They're going with all these cash grants, but their core supporters, they are preparing a list. And in this list is friends, etc. In the process, they are alienating a large section of the Indo-Guyanese community in their stronghold.
Yeah, because if people are going to buy hot dog to get cash grant,
yeah,
you alienate a lot of people.
It is widespread. But what is most important here is to understand that the elitism is not only at the top of the party. The elitism and corruption is operating at various levels. And that is what has pushed the PPP into a corruption crisis. And they cannot handle that by dealing with Brutus. May I say this? I don't believe they are going to deal with Brutus. I believe this is the usual PPP attempt to appear to be doing something, and then they make a backdoor deal, and Brutus goes. Because Brutus obviously knows a lot about their corruption. The commissioner of police obviously knows, and there's serious allegation against the commissioner and most of the top ranks of the police force. So they're really in a dilemma. How do we deal with this fact that corruption is obvious to the smallest child in Guyana? If you bring Stevie Wonder, he will see it. And as they attempt to deal with that, they are now creating conflicts and contradictions. And so you have a crisis of corruption in which neither Barra Jagdeo nor Irfan Ali can deal with, because they are complicit in it. And because the government structure, the senior policemen, the senior army men, etc., are aware, the evidence suggests, and the information out there, that the drugs that were found in the Northwest is linked to the corruption apparatus of the PPP and the state. And so they are in deep crisis. And this crisis of corruption, incompetence, is affecting even their strongholds. And as a result of that, you're seeing a lot of people in their strongholds moving away from the PPP. They might not vote for another party, but they surely are likely to stay home because they have come to recognize that they have nothing to gain from a PPP government. When they give 100,000, one friend of Jack, they kind of with 7 billion. When they give you 500,000, another close ally, the PPP, gone with 698 million. And you know what is happening in the system? As they just had a thing where they say they're giving small contractors money. Mm-hmm. Some of these people ain't got the capacity to deliver. So you know that money going down the drain. And there can be nothing that they can do about it. So the PPP is really in a cul-de-sac. And they can't turn out. Because if they turn out, they can meet people who know what they did and can expose them. And so they got to keep going and applying plaster with the hope that the Guyanese people accept their position. I think they wouldn't. All of Guyana is seeing a Guyana that is in deep crisis. A crisis of corruption, incompetence, divisiveness, cronyism. You can name it. Now, why is it the Guyana police force has to do all they did at Brutus' residence? And then I noticed Brutus saying it was excessive force, etc. Recall, he was part of that apparatus. And like I said, I do believe that there is too much at stake for the PPP to act on these matters. In these situations, only one or two things happen. They either back off or they kill the person who has information on them. I put nothing past the PPP.
Yeah, in such a short space of time, Mr. Norton, this is the police force of the Dion Bascom scandal. You've had several others. Now you have this latest iteration. This is the Brutus scandal. You've said very early, this acting police commissioner, he's not your choice at all. And yes, they are headstrong. I think the Minister of Governance wrote to you recently extolling all of his virtue, and yet here we are dealing with this stuff. We've seen Hickens, the wedding planner, Hickens, the fundraiser. Mr. Jagri himself has said some of these actions are reprehensible, and yet they are going headstrong. They said it's almost a necessity that they have him as the head of the police force. Have you ever seen a police force like this? I mean, you've been around for a little bit.
Well, I've been around fairly long, and I've never seen a Guyana police force that lacks the ability to implement the law, except during that Gajraj period when crime was at its hilt and the PPP itself was involved. But this is a new low, or a new high if it is corruption and mismanagement. What you have here is the promotion of incompetence. The man was neither certified nor qualified to be commissioner, but you put him there. The logical consequence of putting him there is the mismanagement of the Guyana police force. And so all the problems you see in, how could he, let's assume Brutus is correct when he said he wrote the commissioner and the commissioner permitted him. Now, that is a clear indication that the commissioner either doesn't understand his role or is incompetent. And why would he permit Brutus? Because they're all doing the same thing. And so if you were on the road and you engage young policemen, many of them would like to do their jobs, but they have to deal with the reality of a corrupt leadership. And so the police force, the morale in the police force has been destroyed. The management that should be in the police force is destroyed because it is corrupt and it is incompetent. The negative consequence of that is the inability to enforce the law in the way it should be. The consequence of that is the continuous progression towards a lawless society that is led by a criminal cabal. And I've always said, if you have incompetence, you have gangsters running the system, and you link gangsters with political power, you get gangsterism. And so the society is operating as if it is a large gangster mob. Some of them can be equated with some of the known mob leaders in the world, whether they be Escobar or who. And it is unfortunate because that is where we are.
Yeah. As we talk about the quality of policing that we have and the state of the Guyana Police Force, you talked earlier on about the SWAT team and the SOCO going at the acting commissioner of police, assistant commissioner of police residence there, Evelary Compound. Even the manner in which that unfolded seems to leave much to be desired. They had a warrant, didn't want to show him, didn't read the contents, wanted everybody to go in the house. He said one person could come in, the person's name on the warrant, and then they decided not to go. I mean, this thing, you couldn't script this, Mr. Norton.
Well, you could script it. In fact, I've scripted it. They cannot afford to antagonize Brutus to the point where Brutus begins to speak. Brutus, in my opinion, is in a very difficult situation where he would know full well that he's been dealing with a corrupt cabal and that there is public pressure and there's a possibility that they will go after him. On the other hand, you have the government who knows the dangers of going after him. And so I'm saying it is scripted because if you analyze it, they have to put up this facade of going after Brutus.
Yeah. Strong on corruption and so on.
Now, why would you send a SWAT team? Was he armed and dangerous? Is he a marksman that they got to send special squad to get him? And mind you, isn't this in the police compound area?
Yes.
So has the police arrived at the point where people could be in the employ of the police, living in the police compound, but they fear that person is dangerous? Or is it a facade to appear to be going after Brutus, to mete out justice? How did you arrive at 240 crimes in such a short time? Or are they saying they have been investigating Brutus for years? All of these things don't add up.
Because they wanted Brutus to be promoted. In the early around 2021, according to a former chairman of the Police Commission, Paul Snow.
They wanted to promote it.
Yeah.
But then there's another thing that is interesting. The DPP always need time to go through these things. How they get through 240 charges in no time and ready to put them there.
The Dharamlal issue, rightfully you said, took a very long time.
Oh, yes.
Took a long time.
So the plot with Dharamlal was to use the DPP to bid time so that they could let Dharamlal go. Now, I think they are using a different approach to letting Brutus go free. There's a likelihood that they will charge him. But what will happen with the matter is another issue altogether. And so I am not at all sanguine that their aim is to deliver justice. Mm-hmm. I'm convinced that they are protecting themselves and they have to appear to harass Brutus so that they appear to want justice. And then they will just let this go. Because Parajack, Clifton Hicken, Air Finale, none of them can afford for senior policemen to begin to talk about their corruption. If they are going to go in any other direction, the worst case scenario that I worry about is that Brutus could turn up dead, because him being alive could be a problem for the government. And this to me is the usual PPP machinations to be able to browbeat the people of Guyana. And then don't forget they moved from there was no evidence against Brutus. Jacques himself in a press conference said there was nothing criminal. And in under a month, 240 charges. So this to me is, I got a friend, they call it ghoul. Ghoul is where anything does happen anyhow. And I think we're in ghoul.
The trouble with having such a big issue like this, sucking up the air nationally, is that other things might pass by. Also happening on a parallel track is the release of the Police Complaints Authority report. That in itself is a significant indictment against the PPP and the hierarchy of the Ghana police force. Again, pointing hands at the hierarchy, pointing hands at the commission and all of that. What do you make of that report?
The report, I think it got out without them recognizing. They probably didn't go through it to see. I know normally in these circumstances you would send it to the persons accused, but I gained the impression that they didn't go through it and they were blindsided. And so they now have to deal with it. I also believe that they are worried about the report because it adds fuel to the fire that says this police force leadership is corrupt, incompetent, and therefore, but you know, the amount of issues that are emerging, no matter how you could multitask, it's not easy to multitask all this corruption. I mean, you got to bring the good Lord from above. The PPP every day faces corruption scandals involving the leadership. I want to make a call here. In the light of all that has been said, the government should do a forensic audit of its ministers' accounts and earnings. Because this clearly is not just restricted to the police. And if Barra Jack Deo is serious, and I know he isn't, about dealing with corruption, each one of them should have their accounts audited so that the nation knows who is corrupt and who isn't. But, I find it interesting that Robeson Ben isn't saying anything. Because if you follow Robeson, he has been quietly anti-corruption. It reminds me of when Gail Teixeira made some pronouncement during the crime spree. And I believe also they have difficulty getting the Minister of Home Affairs to come out on the side of this high level of corruption. And so you're not only getting division amongst the corrupt, you're getting division between the corrupt and those who might have come from the Dr. Jagan era and believe that there's need for a certain modicum of decency. And from my analysis, Robeson Ben is PPP part of it, but he seems to not want to become embroiled in this because of the barefacedness of the corruption.
Yeah, and as you rightfully said, it was Starbuck thing pointed out just last week that as a Minister of Home Affairs, he's very quiet amidst all of this happening. Bertrand Ramcharan, Professor Bertrand Ramcharan, talked about us becoming an autocratic state, creeping towards that, showing shades of that. He was pillared in the media. In this morning's papers, he comes back to say he stands by what he's saying and again points to all of what is happening currently. He talks to the fact that, committees in the National Assembly hardly ever meet. The National Assembly hardly ever meets. He talks about the opposition not being consulted, the strong hand of the government and all of that. As part of what is happening in this society currently, what do you make of his comments and thoughts?
If you're dealing with political science concepts, you have to know what the concept is saying. I believe he is right that it is autocracy hurtling towards dictatorship. Why do we say that? It is evident that one man is making the major decisions. which is one of the things that are indicative of an autocratic society. One person wielding the political power. And even though Irfan is trying to challenge, you still see that the autocratic hand is in charge. Second element you have to look at when you're looking at the autocratic society is the use of the police force. In autocratic societies, the law doesn't matter. The police is used to enforce the will of the autocrat. And what you're seeing here is the police force being used to enforce the will. You have in this country many people who are losing their lands, etc. And when they call the police say, we can't deal with them. They're above me. But when it comes to political opponents, the police suddenly finds its way there and enforce the will of this story at the East Bank, where the police came in and virtually enforced the will of a businessman, is indicative of what is happening. So the police has been compromised. The Dharamlal case points to the fact that they are not prepared to follow the law. The non-following of the law is an indication of autocracy. In fact, a direct manifestation of it. And so, for them to say it's autocratic is there. Now let's turn to the government service, where public servants should be free to do their work, but they are directed by the government. Let's look at you employ 10-day workers, but you bully them to go to political rallies. That is an indication of autocracy and political domination. Let us look at contracts awarding. The law provides for a fair mechanism. Just the people that Jack do they want get the major contracts. That says it is the hands of the government, not guided by principles of procurement. So in every area that you look, you will see the law provides for subvention to democratic councils, be they regional or national. The government intervenes and decides who get and who don't get. Lenin ain't got none to get now. Georgetown ain't got none. New Amsterdam. Now that they're in charge of Madhya, resources start to flow. Rupanuni start to flow. All of those are indications that they are not going to live by the Constitution, which says NDCs, RDC should be self-governed and guided by the law. So he is right. Every element, and I can go through more elements. I mean, just look at him threatening Kaicho News.
Yeah. With the ads.
Yeah. That is an indication that your interest is not in a free press. Your interest is in compliance.
And then I saw him trying to,
must comply, etc.
I saw the vice president trying to procure you.
Well, the vice president knows that I am more sensible than that. He only mentioned New Nation to make his case credible. They have not given New Nation any advertisements or anything. In fact, everything they do is aimed at suppressing the opposition. I am sensible enough to know that he mentioned the New Nation to give credibility to his desire to give the mirror. But I am not fooled. And even with that, it was a threat. He didn't make the action yet because I don't know that he wants a clash with Kaicho News for other reasons that I know. And so I agree totally that we are an autocratic society, hurtling, moving very fast to becoming a dictatorship if we aren't there already. And the worst dictatorship is one in which political power is linked to business and is linked to the law enforcement agencies, and they are working together against the people of our country. That is where Guyana is.
As you're on that note, What do you make of this fascination with Rickford Burke and government almost bending over backwards, going out of its way on the Rickford Burke matter? Most recently, they said they have hired a law firm overseas to pursue Rickford Burke.
The government is obsessed with domination and control. Rickford falls outside of their jurisdiction, and therefore they cannot use the extant state apparatus,
The SWAT and the so-called
to deal with him. So it is getting under their skin, because as autocrats and dictators, they are accustomed to silencing people and getting their way. Rickford falls, or whether Rickford is doing it right or wrong, is not the issue for them. What is the issue is here is somebody that is outside of the jurisdiction that we can't put hand on. And so what they're doing is developing ways and means to seem to be able to put hand on Rickford and control him and dominate him. Now, they are people who have committed crime right in this country that are close to the PPP, that they don't go to those lengths to bring to justice. But they are prepared to do it extra-jurisdictionally so that they can dominate and control. The fact that they search Melly Mel Mother House is also an indication that here is another person that isn't within the jurisdiction. And you know, the PPP's biggest nightmare, and I said this, the first event that the PPP became involved in after they came to power was to go to Rickford Burke's house, to Christopher Jones' house, in total violation of the law. Judge gave an order, they ignored it. That was the first indication where they headed. And I said then that the government must recognize that information technology has changed the world, and that social media is a political actor in itself. And one of the problems the government has is that it cannot control social media. And the mechanism that the likes of Burke and Melly Mel are using is social media. And in this modern world, if you're going to be a democratic government, you will have to live with the fact that social media exists and that it could be used negatively or positively. And they wouldn't attempt to counter it in the information technology world. They want to counter it by putting their hand on Burke and destroying him. I don't think it would happen.
During the presentation by Irfan Ali in the National Assembly, as we wrap up, he talked about Guyana, a Vision 2030. They seem to have a lot of things. It's one, Guyana's Vision 2030 is a number of things. Since becoming leader of the opposition, you've spoken consistently about a people-centered governance, a people-centered approach, a people-centered governance. In these very trying times, talk to us about that as we head into a national and regional election period.
If you are a government in waiting, you should have clear ideas for an alternative government. We have consistently, from the time I became leader, outlined what we consider to a people-centered development strategy. We began very early to say the things that will happen under us, to the point where the PPP is doing some of them under different names. Now, the PPP has always been in conceptual confusion after they came to power in 1992. What had happened to the PPP is that it was a communist party, and it was doctrinaire. And it came to power in 1992. It met a structural adjustment program initiated by Desmond Hoyt. And so a lot of those things took on a life of its own. Mm-hmm. And the PPP merely went along with it. They didn't have any ideas to make changes, etc. So what has happened is over the years, they have not conceptually defined what is their philosophy and what they set out to do.
Excuse me.
It has been compounded with the corruption, etc., to the point where people now believe that their only ideology is corruption, transactionalism. When I became leader of the opposition, I felt, and leader of the party, that we had to define clearly where we are heading. And a group of us got together and we looked at what Ghana was, and we saw a Ghana that is only serving the elite in the PPP, their friends, family, and favorites. And we felt with the advent of oil resources, we have to deliver a proper vision of Guyana with clear policies. We have just recently outlined what we will do in oil and gas. We are going to be outlining some more. At the appropriate time, we will disclose them. But we have outlined a people-centered development strategy in which we said a number of things. One, our aim is to develop a sustainable economy in which the people of Guyana are benefiting. We have said that we must put resources in the hands of the people of Guyana, but we must do it different to the PPP. It must be predictable, structured, and done within the legal framework. The PPP isn't into that. We have also analyzed the key problems we have. In housing, for instance, a lot of people do not have the resources to go to the bank and get a mortgage. And that is why we have advocated our rent-to-own, in which the government will build and put people to live in it. They pay rent, and when the rent covers the cost of the house becomes their house. And so we think that is the way to go. We have made it very clear that we will subsidize electricity, water. The law says health services should be free. What is this government doing? This government, through corruption, takes a lot of the resources that should be in the public health sector and channel it to the private health sector. We're not against private people being in health. What we are against is the people of Guyana being deprived of health services which they are entitled to, free, and they are being put in the hands of friends of the government. We're totally against that. And so we are advocating for a health system that is national and provides quality health services. We don't believe building a hospital will deliver health services. They keep building hospitals, but the health system isn't improving. We believe we need to train the personnel to manage it. We believe we need to train the personnel to be able to work in it and deliver quality health. We will focus on that. And so we see our people-centered development strategy as one in which whenever we conceptualize something, we put the people of Guyana first and operate in the interests of the people of Guyana, while at the same time not being anti-private sector. We want to see the private sector progress, but we don't want to see any sector progress at the expense of the people of Guyana. And as we get closer to the election, we have many more measures we're outlined. I just talk about what we will do in terms of, I went to Mocha and said, well, with the high incidence of people with kidney problems, etc., the state should finance dialysis. I thought they would have jumped on that, but they're not going to jump on that. You know why? Their friends benefit from private dialysis. And now I have no problem with people who are wealthy going and do their dialysis wherever they want. But I have a problem if the government has the resources to ensure people who need that treatment, they have the resources to deliver it, and they are not delivering it. And in our people-centered development strategy, we will put the mechanisms in place to ensure that the ordinary man, the man who cannot afford to pay the kind of money, everywhere I go, I went to Bushlot, and a man walked up to me. His big problem is the costs for dialysis. And so things like that we're going to look at. I have said, we have pensioners who retired in the 80s. And if you know how pension goes, It can be based on the levels of remuneration in the 80s. And here I'm talking about government pensioners, former ministers of government who can get $40,000 because at the time it was so low. I have said that as part of our people-centered development strategy, we will review the whole pension structure and ensure we deliver pensions in which our people can live and live comfortably. It is unfair to have people serve this country and then in their latter years, they cannot live a comfortable life. Only recently, I had reports of what is happening at the Palms, in which, though a lot of money is budgeted for food, etc., they are not getting what they should get. People in the Palms frightened to go to the top floor because they could fall through. And what was the minister's solution to these issues that was raised? Was to put cameras in the Palms so they could see who moved. And if they bring out the information, they can deal with them. That obviously is not a people-centered approach. And I noticed Irfan Ali have been trying to use people-centered as a concept. He's shifting away from his One Guyana. Well, One Guyana was thievery as well, because in 2006, Robert Corbyn ran under One Guyana. So they lack ideas. They do not sit and analyze the problems of when a vice president could say all you're concerned about is feasibility studies. Something has to be wrong with him. In this world where projects are done properly, they are done by feasibility studies. And he should know that his failure to have feasibility studies for Skeldon wasted our money. His failure to have feasibility study for the fiber optic cable wasted our money. And so, as he goes down this road of believing he's God, and wake up a morning and pull some project from his head, we will take a totally different approach. In our people-centered development strategy, we are analyzing every sector and we are putting in place clear policies and programs so that on getting government, we can hit the road running. We think we have already shown to this country that we can run a government better than the People's Progressive Party. People's Progressive Party's strength is making money illegally. That doesn't run a country.
Mr. Norton, thank you so much for this time and for bringing clarity on these matters. We hope you can sit down with us again and talk about some other issues.
Feel free anytime. I'm disposed to engage in.
Thank you so much.